Right.
Okay.
Round two then. Okay, so we've come to the end of the Steve Hackett time, or thereabouts, and then I believe you did some other work.
Well, the Steve Hackett time was ended until 89.
Okay.
89. So the bits and pieces we're doing, because there's the Feedback 86 stuff, all the stuff that led up to that.
Right.
But it's all very piecemeal, that, because it happened in lots of different studios for lots of very short, periods of time.
Yeah.
So it's difficult to remember specific things about that.
Okay.
Apart from just fleeting memories of some of the studios we went to. I remember going to Eel Pie Studio when we recorded Bonnie Tyler doing Prize Fighters.
Mm-hmm.
Or as I always called it, Fried Spiders.
I'm not even going to ask why.
Next time you listen to that, Fried Spiders.
You're going straight to hell for that one.
Brilliant. Well, okay, I think we'll move along with time.
Yes,
okay.
Moving swiftly on.
So, having exited time with Steve, I've got that you did some other material with a band that I certainly have a particular interest in, as they are relatively local to me, and that's China Crisis.
Yes.
Wow. Flaunt the Imperfection.
Indeed.
I believe you're involved with.
Yes.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I basically did. Well, you always tend to move around in circles of musicians, and so a lot of the work that you get, session work, because I from about 1983, 4-ish, I started doing sessions recording sessions outside, which initially got started off via Ian Mosley, because Ian used to do lots of recording sessions as well.
Right.
And I asked him one day, how do you get onto sessions? And he said, oh, well, basically he put me forward, he suggested me for something. It's by recommendation, inevitably, unless you've got an agent, which I didn't have. It's word of mouth and recommendation. Right. So he recommended me, I started getting more and more work, and kind of got in with a bunch of musicians who were generally centred around the Hastings area, and so I did various work with them. And that came about, actually, the connection with the Hastings lot was through Terry Pack, who was, played bass with the Enid, and still has some fairly recent occasions as well. Terry was and still is a very good friend. He kind of put me in touch with all of these Hastings crowds, so I used to go down there and do stuff with some of them. That just led to being asked if I was interested in doing a session that was coming up to Battle Studio at some point. It was China Crisis coming with Walter Becker, and was I interested in doing the keyboards? Yeah. And so I was a bit petrified, because Steely Dan and Walter, don't come without what do you call it? A reputation.
Reputation, yeah.
Baggage is the word that springs to mind.
Well, whatever you heard about Walter, I don't know. But all I can say is that he was the sweetest, nicest, kindest, most supportive and encouraging producer I've ever worked with. There've been some nice people, and there's been some absolute total bastards. But Walter's just probably one of the best. I was terrified, of course. It was because I think the job lasted. It was a long time, and I basically spent long periods in residence down there at the studio. In fact, it wasn't at the actual studio because there wasn't enough room to put everybody up the band, because the band was staying at the studio, but me and a couple of the other session players were staying in some big country house, just very nearby. which was very interesting. So it was kind of an in-residence job, and it went on for 3 or 4 weeks continuously. But it was one of the happiest times I've had outside of my own outside of the autumn Hackett sort of safe, cosy havens. Things like that, situations like that are safe, cosy havens. No harm can come to you in those. But quite often when you go out and do sessions, you're very vulnerable, and people can be very horribly rude and demanding and unappreciative and just basically stupid sometimes. But this was just like a little family unit again. The guys in the band were just absolutely lovely.
Gary and Eddie
and Gaz Johnson and the lovely, what was the drummer's name who died? Gary. No, not Gary.
I can't remember now. No, I can't remember.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, they were actually.
It'll come back.
They were in Liverpool last night. They were.
Were they?
Yeah, I didn't get to see them, unfortunately, but they were in Liverpool last night.
Yeah, but they're really sweet, and I loved the songs. I really enjoyed the songs. The songs were just like, this is really grown-up pop music, using good melodies, nice chord sequences that don't always go where you think they're going to. This is proper grown-up music.
So do you remember any of the tracks that you worked on back from that?
All of them.
All of them?
Yes.
From that album, yeah?
Yes, I did pretty much all the keyboards. I mean, Walter did a couple of bits of piano, but other than that, the keyboards were all me.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah.
What keyboards were you on there?
Very limited. I had a DX7.
Right, okay.
And an MKS30 Planet S module, which is the JX3P in a module.
Yeah.
Did I have... I don't think I even took the Jupiter. But I know why. It's because MIDI was fairly... well, it wasn't new then, and MIDI had been around for 3 years then. But at the time we were doing Highly Strung with the Jupiter, there was no MIDI. So of course, none of the keyboards could talk to each other. But the new MIDI thing was so... because one thing we didn't mention about Till We Have Faces was that MIDI did exist when we did Till We Have Faces. So when we came back and did all the subsequent overdubs in Marcus Studio for that, when we came back from Brazil, and this is a huge diversion back from where we were earlier. Sorry about that, but it is kind of relevant. I was obsessed with trying to get the most out of what MIDI offered, and the Jupiter 8 didn't have MIDI, and the only digital interface there existed with that was a retrofit kit you could get called the DCB8 or something like that, but it was very complicated and it didn't offer very much. But MIDI communicated not just the note data, because the DCB connection only did note data. I don't think it did anything else at all. But MIDI was offering more and more, and so you could, modulation well in the pitch, and some of the knobs even would transmit their data from one instrument to another. So of course I was keen to get the most out of that. So pretty much all of Till We Have Faces overdubs. The original tracks were done on the Jupiter. The overdubs were done with the Jupiter 6, which were borrowed.
Okay.
And the DX7, which I just got.
Right.
MIDI together, and the MKS30, which I already had. So it was DX7, MKS30, and the Jupiter 6, all MIDI together to make noises.
Okay. So
so hence the setup I used for Flaw and Imperfection was similarly MIDI concerned. I didn't take the Jupiter. I just had it's pretty much just those two things. It was the DX7 and the MKS30 really, and my little thing tucked in the corner there, my Yamaha KX5 shoulder slung remote.
So because one of the questions previously there was actually about MIDI and sort of, because obviously right back then that was relatively new then. So how did you kind of learn that and then implement it into what you were doing?
Well, there wasn't much to MIDI at a start. As I say, its implementation has just kind of grown over the years, so there wasn't a lot to learn. You just basically plug one into another, play notes on one, and they appear on the other one as well.
Which is what I do right now.
The basic. That's the basic thing.
But you hear so much about what it can do. It kind of because I know something what I'm doing at the moment. It's literally just plug in, and gets one keyboard plays another one, and end of. But obviously, there's so much more that it can.
Oh yeah, well yes, it goes a lot further than that now. But So there wasn't really that much to learn about it. It's, you know, as I say, just it was more to do with it's the sound layering that
Yes.
possibilities. You know, the fact you could combine an FM synthesis sound with an analog synthesis sound.
Yeah. So how did you find programming the DX7 then?
When
There's so many horrible stories about that.
Well, I've got mine early on because I actually got mine just a little bit before they appeared in the shops here.
Right.
And the reason for that was that I went to Japan in 1983 to take part in the Yamaha World Popular Song Festival, which is the Japanese equivalent of Eurovision.
Yes, okay.
Exactly the same excessive, over-the-top kind of show, where the winner is fixed right from the very beginning. You know.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
It's a show based on hierarchy.
Yeah.
You know, and predetermined winners.
Mm.
But nevertheless, it's just a great thing to do. It was basically I was backing a singer called Louise Tucker who who had a hit in Europe that year. A thing called Midnight Blue, based on the pastoral, Beethoven's pastoral.
Right. Yeah.
You know the one. Midnight Blue, there's present force of you. That's how it went. But it was a really nice song. It was a really nice track, and the writers, producers of it were Tim Smith and Charlie Scarbeck. Charlie Scarbeck has subsequently gone on to write all the sort of rugby union theme tunes for TV. Tim Smith subsequently went on to just develop that very little thing called the Eden Project.
Right. Okay.
For it is that Tim Smith.
Yes.
He was originally a musician and producer, but I used to do loads and loads of stuff with Tim and Charlie. So basically, Louise, Tim, Charlie and me went over to Japan to do this thing. And while we were there, Charlie and I spent lots of money on musical equipment, because we went down the Shinjuku, which is like their Tottenham Court Road. And went into all the music stores and saw all these, you know, new bits of kit that they get before we do. And not only that, but at Japan prices, which at the time were a teeny fraction
cheaper.
Yes, teeny fraction. So, for example, when the DX7 came out here, it was something in the order of £1,300. In Japan, it was about 500.
Big difference then,
Yeah, huge difference.
Yeah.
So, because we were taking part in this show, and because of course it's the Yamaha Song Contest and sponsored by Yamaha, we got Yamaha to provide both me and I think we all got one. Maybe I can't remember. I certainly got one anyway. A DX7 to get familiar with it before we went to Japan, because we had to play live. It wasn't miming. We had a full orchestra backing us, but we actually had to play our bits live. And since most of the record, you know, well, it wasn't. The record was done on analog synths and stuff like that, because they used to use, you know, Jupiters and all this kind of stuff too, Charlie. But I wanted to do it on the DX7 because it was, you know, this new thing. So I got mine ahead of release here, and as soon as I got it, I shut myself away for I don't know how long, you know, a couple of weeks. I just did nothing but, you know, every day I just turn this thing on and go, how the hell does this work?
So I believe it's a bit of a nightmare.
So
I believe it's a bit of a nightmare.
It takes a little to get your head around it, and the results, unlike an analog synth where the results are in many ways predictable, you know, basically what's going to happen if you turn a knob, what, you know, it's either going to open or close a filter, or change an envelope speed, or turn up the resonance, or change the tuning or pitch or waveform or something. But the DX7, it's all mathematics, you know, it's just like you modulate this sine wave at that volume and pitch with that sine wave at that volume and pitch, and then put the sum of those two into another sine wave to modulate that one at that volume and pitch, and then have an envelope on these. You know, you can't predict what's going to happen.
No.
But after a while, you learn there are a couple of basic tricks.
Yeah. Okay.
You just know that if you combine, oscillator A with oscillator B at that volume and that pitch, you'll get a square wave.
Right.
Or if you do it at that volume and that pitch, you'll get a sawtooth wave. So you can work from various starting points. And at the time there were a couple of useful tutorial, very simple, straight tutorial things that explained some of those simple starting points. So it's like if you want to make a string sound, you basically start with sawtooth waves, and this is how you do it, And then you'd know that, and you could use that as a basic as a kick-off point.
Yeah.
Because it was something that you could relate to, it was something that other people could relate to, because of course once, as soon as the DX7 became popular, people were wanting people to come in and program them for them. So I got quite a few gigs as a DX7 programmer.
Right. Okay.
And usually people would, because they had absolutely no idea what the thing could do, they were invariably asking for sounds that really had a very common everyday point of reference, like can you do a brass sound, a string sound, a piano sound, or whatever. And so using your knowledge of how you would do it on an analog synth with the quick shortcut methods, you could make something that they could relate to. And I mean, the fact that it didn't sound particularly brilliant didn't matter. In fact, it just came from a DX7, so it was brilliant.
So because back then, just about everyone had a DX7. Yeah.
Well, pretty much, yes. It became common currency.
You saw it on television, or sort of banned on television. DX7 was there.
Yeah. And then I started getting a bit better at it, and I was able to make a rather more, kind of sounds that you kind of associate with more complex FM kind of sounds.
Yes. Yeah.
I've forgotten how to do most of it now. I've got the FM7 and the FM8 plugins.
Right.
I hardly ever use them. If I do, I just pick one of the presets that's nearest to what I'm thinking, or just go through the presets until I find something that's kind of, that'll work, that's nice. And I'm terrible, because I always used to berate people for using presets. In fact, in the session days, in the mid 80s, when like there were all these synths going on, like the Prophet and the Jupiter 8 and the Memory Moon and the Oberheim OB8s and all this kind of stuff. All the session keyboard players prided themselves on their own personally designed sounds, and jealously guarded them. And you just wouldn't let anything go. If somebody said, "How do you get that sound?" You just go, for me to know, you find out. You work it out yourself. I'm not telling you, because it was your bread and butter. It was your arsenal, or your personal arsenal of sounds that identified you and what you could do with them. You didn't want to give that away, because that's like giving your work away, giving your jobs away. But it was interesting that the people that service these machines just didn't realise that, because I remember the guy that used to run Psychosystems. The two, there's Jonathan Cole, I think his name was, and Steve Payne, Peter Gabriel's cousin, who ran Psychosystems, that did all that, basically sold and distributed all the really high-end music gear. They used to laugh at the fact that people would bring their Prophet 5s back in to be serviced, and they'd just sit there going, you know what, I don't know why people clamour for having a synth like this that can do so much, because every synth that comes back in's just got the factory presets in it still. And what the point they missed was that yes, it has, because they've been reloaded back in. Basically, people save off their own sounds, and you reload the factory presets because they just know. Because I knew what used to happen with those places. People who forgot to do that, people who neglected to do that, they'd send their synth in to be serviced, and the next thing you knew, all their sounds were being sold, as third-party libraries, and they'd be going, "That's my sound. That's really like the sound I programmed up." And so people were well aware that they'd get stitched up. Their sounds would be stolen and sold on, and they wouldn't get anything for it. So people were very careful to load their factory presets back in. So the assumption was made that nobody ever programmed their synths, which of course they did.
Well, jumping a few years forward now, so back to your stuff, your solo stuff. So we're at home in your studio, and maybe you'd like to tell a little bit about what you use now compared to where you were using back then.
Right. Well, as you can see, space is not at a premium. Do a little twirl now.
Do a little twirl, Alan.
Not going right the way bloody round, otherwise it'll have my ugly mug in
Yes,
it.
it'll probably have your right arm in it anyway.
Go slowly. There you go, look at that.
Space is not at a premium.
There you go. Look at that. So,
You're showing me well,
a little bit
folks.
about what you are, what
So-
you're using now then.
Well,
Where are we
well
today?
I just love new ways of doing things, and I like to have, you know, as much of an armoury of instruments available as possible.
Mhm.
The form that they take isn't important to me.
Mhm.
All they need to do is be good and sound great and be fun to play
Mhm.
and moderately easy to operate.
Yeah.
Well, you don't want much then.
I know. Well, fortunately, most things these days are nice and good and fun. But I would love to have kept all my old analogue gear. But if you ever saw this studio, which you don't think you ever did, you might have done maybe your first visit.
Yeah.
This room was just full. There's a big A-frame there and an A-frame there, a huge mixing desk there. You couldn't swing a cat in here, and it was. And in fact, one day the pile of modules and gear on that A-frame by the fireplace there literally did fall on top of me, and it was. I was going, oh God, what do I do? Save myself or save the gear? I don't know. It was a frightening moment. Actually, luckily I managed to do both, but fortunately with the advent of virtual instruments, I can get all that stuff and so much more in a zero footprint. No mass, no footprint, but lots of fun and loads of music.
Yeah.
That's the important thing. After all, at the end of the day, getting to music
Yeah.
is what you're after doing. Yes, there is a huge amount of pleasure in owning and playing with the physical hardware, but on a practical level, I just couldn't have any more. And also, it keeps it needs maintaining. Things do go wrong. The only hardware I've kept is these here. So, and obviously this keyboard.
Would you like to just talk us through one or two of those, Nick, the main ones?
Yeah, well, the main ones, the one piece of hardware that gets used more than anything else is that one,
Okay.
which oddly enough is the least sophisticated of these three. These three are all based around the same type of synth engine. That's the JB1080,
Yeah.
which is like a multi-timbral sample-based synth.
Yeah.
The JB2080, which is the later model of that, which just improves various functions, more effects, insert effects and stuff like that, and better sound quality. Basically, it's a bit quieter, bigger edit window and everything like that. And then the XV5080, which is basically like a 2080 with added sampling. You can load samples in and play that and everything like that.
Yeah.
But strangely enough, the one I use all the time is this one, because it's just so easy. It sounds great, even though it's the least sophisticated of the models. It still sounds brilliant. It's just a doddle to set up and twiddle sounds. That's if I had to get rid of one of, only keep one of those three, it would be the oldest of them. That one. But they all get used to some extent. Not a great deal, but there's just certain sounds that come out of those things that just don't seem to exist anywhere else in the world. What's next? P330 module is the piano SAS, the structured adaptive synthesis piano, which started. Remember the RD1000 from the early 80s.
Yeah, the name rings a bell.
Elton John started. He made those famous by playing those. This is the old, eventual evolution of that series of instruments.
Right.
It's, but the reason I keep this purely is for the electric piano.
Right. Okay.
Which you can hear featured on the track Entropy on Harmonix.
So
if you listen to the electric piano in there, it's that.
Ah.
And nothing else. I've got really nice Rhodes piano samples and everything like that, but they sound like Rhodes pianos. This sounds like that.
Right.
It has its own quality, and nothing else, again, sounds like that really, apart from the MKS20 module, that also sounds like that. Don't use that anymore, so that's a drum module, so that's not used. D550 I still use from time to time, which is a module version of the D50.
Which, yes, yeah.
and I don't use the wave station at all anymore.
Right.
So,
Okay.
so a couple of those are defunct. The Supernova is a lovely keyboard. Doesn't get a lot of use, but the one sound which I made up, which I first used on the Hexameron album, which I made a simulation of an EBow.
Right,
Because
okay.
I would play with EBow, which even Steve thinks is him.
Right.
I played him a couple of tracks, I played him tracks with the EBow on, and he goes, "Am I playing on this?" And I go, "No, it's me." He goes, "Oh, it's your bloody EBow thing again." Damn, it sounds like me.
He's just trying to claim a royalty.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of that already in what I've been working on. So that's the favourite sound on there, but it's a really lovely synth. It can do 8 parts at once,
Right,
with MIDI
yeah.
channels. And again, it's got a very liquid analog sound to it, even though it's completely
Digital.
virtual analog in there. It's probably one of the nicest sounding of the virtual analog synth keyboards I think anyone ever made.
Yeah.
And they don't make those anymore.
No,
Stupidly.
Right. So, software you're moving towards?
And software moving.
Or have moved to?
Completely moved virtually
Yeah.
lock, stock and barrel, because there's just so much of it. So yes, the majority of what goes on is all software
Yeah.
based,
Yeah.
and all driven from the
Yes,
VC3.
well, yeah.
Yes, driven from there. I've even stopped using the piano sound on this. I don't use any of the internal sounds on this. As good as they are, I mean the internal sounds on this are great, and they're fantastic live. When I was doing the gigs with John back in 2010, God, I cannot believe I've had this for 6 years. It still feels like I bought this last week.
Yeah.
I had it for over 6 years, 6.5 years. Jesus.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's some brilliant sounds on
But
that. One,
yeah, I mean, obviously when we played with John, all of the sounds came from this. Even because we did a whole bunch of songs that were programmed up with multi tracks and stuff. I mean, it's one of the few keyboards or instruments you'll find which has got the RMI sounds in it.
Right. Yeah.
And
Which is really useful.
Which is one of the things I really like because I've always loved the RMI. I know it's something. It's a love it or loathe it instrument basically. Some people can't see the point. It's like, what's the point of it? And it's like, because it sounds great. It's just, it just has a kind of, it has a dumb simplicity to the sound, which just kind of is intriguing. I can't explain it. Anyway, it does those, and it's got mellotrons, and it's got pianos and clarinets and Wurlitzers and everything. They've got all the kind of sounds I like to use because as much as I have a massive, stupidly huge sound palette available to me, it's like the wardrobe syndrome. Basically, if your wardrobe is so big and it's so full of clothes, you just open the door to just go, I haven't got a thing to wear, because you can't make a choice. You can't decide. And having too many sounds at your disposal is a bit like that, but it's still very useful because to have them anyway, because sometimes you're just really looking for something that's serendipitous. I won't use the phrase off the wall because I hate it, because it means it's stupid. I've got thrown that phrase so many times in sessions. You're like, oh, just come up with something off the wall. How about your head? Yes. Off the wall has beyond infinite meanings, and what's off the wall to one person will be utterly dull and boring to somebody else. So trying to guess what's off the wall from somebody else, it's hard enough to guess what's off the wall for yourself.
Yes.
The only off the wall really, you just have to strike that out and just say accident, serendipity, fortuitous,
weird.
That wasn't meant to that wasn't meant to happen, but I like it. That's really what it means. So those sounds are useful when you get that kind of idea in your head. But for the most part, I like to base things around a well-tried sound palette, which includes all the old favourites. And I do object to the fact if you use them, people say, "Oh, it sounds dated." Yeah, okay. So you're using a guitar, that's dated.
Yeah.
Bill Haley played a guitar. God, are you so in the 50s? I mean. The piano, good grief, Beethoven played a piano. My God, you're so retro, you're so out of date. They're just musical instruments. If they work for you, use them.
Go for it.
You know, so yes, I like, you know, good old electric piano sounds, you know, Rose's Wurlitzer's acoustic pianos, clavinets, organs, you know, Hammond, Mellotron, Moog, RMI, whatever. I love working with that, with those kind of basic solid foundations, because you can really hang the more esoteric stuff off them. Play with things, you know, play instruments that you're comfortable with. I can't see the sodding point of finding weird sounds that nobody's heard of just for the sake of it. Why? They have to fulfill a function. If they don't fulfill a function in the music, then sod them. Don't do this. Don't do it. You know, I don't understand this desperate urge for people to say, oh, things have got to be cutting edge. And yet at the same time, there's this massive market for all things retro. Make up your minds. What's it? What's it to be? I mean, I don't want to come up with, you know, weird synth sounds that nobody's heard of. Because, for a start, nobody cares anymore. Nobody is impressed by that stuff anymore. People, there used to be a time when people said, you know, a bit like movies, you know, before CGI came along, people used to say, God, how did they do that? You know, they just blew up the Empire State Building. How did they do that? It looks so real. You know, the answer was lots of hard work, model making, pyrotechnics, and really good, interesting stuff like that. Now, you know, I'm sure we're going to see an Independence Day resurgence. We're going to see the whole of, you know, every major landmark in the world ripped up. Nobody's going to sit there going, how did they do that?
Because they already know.
Because they already know. There's no magic. There's no magic in it. What was the point I was going to make? I'm just heading towards a really kind of nitty-gritty point there. Oh, sod it. Rewind the thing and play it back.
About the sounds, wasn't it?
Yes, it's inventing sounds for the sake of it. Because nobody cares. Nobody actually wants to know. People used to say, "Oh, that's a great sound you got on that thing. How did you do it?" I mean, like you've just been doing earlier on. And but nobody asks that anymore. Nobody ever says, "How did you get that sound?" And there are quite some, you know. Yes, there's lots of bread and butter sounds on my albums, but there's also lots of very inventive things that you know took a long time to come up with and were designed to fit a particular thing. Nobody ever asks. Nobody ever asks what the hell we did to Debbie's voice on Marduk, for example. You know, because we wanted it to sound otherworldly. Nobody said, "Wow, that's a really weird effect. What did you do?" Well, I'll tell you what we did.
What did you do to Debbie's voice on Marduk?
We got two. Well, Dick discovered by accident if you get two. Well, we haven't got them here. We got at his house. He's got these Habitat cereal bowls, which are made of what looks like black granite. I don't know what they are. It's just earthenware of some kind. But if you nestle one inside the other and then rotate them, it goes a bit like the, you know, Darth Vader's TIE fighter noise, like that. And so by doing that rotating thing, we just recorded a stretch of that and looped it, and then used that as the modulating signal in a vocoder.
Right.
Or the carrier signal. So yes, the modulator. Debbie's voice is the carrier. So her voice is being vocoded with rotating cereal bowls, and it makes it sound kind of slightly alien.
Sounds similar to the effect of a rotating Leslie.
Not really, no.
No.
Not really.
Partial.
You'd think. I know exactly where you're coming from, but it doesn't. No, it's just kind of, well, it's a subtle effect. I mean, it's not over the top, but like you know. Nobody's ever said, how did you do that? Nobody says it at all, especially, you know, and that was 10 years, 12 years ago. Certainly nobody asks those questions now. Nobody actually cares, because they just assume, oh, it's all software, you just press the button. In fact, nobody assumes you actually put any work in on anything. It's just like, oh, you just pressed the button, didn't you? That's how you... I just remember having this argument with one of John Hackett's relatives. Is at a garden party in John's house when he used to live in Aylesbury. And it was one of his uncles, I can't remember which one it was, but we actually ended up having a huge row at the bottom of John's garden. Because he was just saying, well, you don't do anything, you just press a button, don't you? You know, you don't even write the stuff, do you?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, people don't seem to realise the fact that, yeah, somebody might press the button, but what comes off that button when it's pressed, somebody else has had to create for them to press that button and get that sound.
Yeah.
And that's what they're forgetting.
Yeah.
Well, the button pressing just goes, beyond just selecting the sound. It's like what you do with it and the music that's surrounding it. It's just like, it just creates itself, doesn't it? The computer does it all for you, doesn't it?
It was quite interesting because one of the questions I actually wrote there is, I've listened to your albums quite a few times now, and obviously there's a whole range of sounds there. And I was going to say, how did you actually come to get some of those more obscure of the sounds, particularly related to your own sorts of albums?
Well, you'd have to mention what they were, because to me they're all fairly unremarkable. So they'd have to select some, to pick on some things. So
we'll go to Mnemonics, to the latest. Your latest album at the moment, so I'm trying to think of some of the sounds now that's in there, but maybe you could just talk us through the actual album itself and some of the sounds you've used in that. And there's one particular one that I've put further down here. It's about the On Martineau, because I've seen your YouTube on the On Martineau, which is just an incredible sort of video. So maybe you could tell us a bit about that as well and how you incorporated that into your work.
Yes. Where do I start? Okay. Right. Time. What do you say about? It's very difficult to describe your own music. It's. I mean, the best description is just playing it. But
yeah. What inspired you about that particular item though? I mean, because it's 1928 or something, and 1928.
Well, how did you encounter it in the first place to actually decide that that's something that you'd want to use?
Yeah.
What? How do you mean?
The Old Martineau.
Oh, sorry, the Old Martineau.
Right.
Yeah.
Come on, pay attention, Magnus.
No, I thought we jumped on and
Yeah.
Okay, back on track again. I've always been a fan of the On Martineau. That's one of the first instruments I was aware of when I was first getting interested in, in keyboard related things in the 60s. During the 1960s when I was only a kid. I was aware of the On Martineau then because it was used on a couple of the very early sort of electronic, synthy based albums that I bought, which all sound horribly cheesy now, but at the time they were I was utterly, transfixed by it all. And On Martineau frequently appeared on these things, and also was being used on movie soundtracks since time immemorial. People always mistake it for a theremin, because they both have not a similar tone, but they're both kind of glidey, sine wavy kind of.
I'm going to ask the obvious question there. What's the difference between them?
The difference between them, okay. A theremin is basically a box with a loop antenna on it and a large antenna. Inside is, the older ones would have been valve-generated oscillator. I can't be too specific about how they work, but it generates tones using a valve oscillator. And basically it has no keyboard or anything. It usually sits on a table or on a stand, and the only controls you have are over pitch and volume. The volume is on the loop antenna on the side, and the pitch is the straight antenna up there. So the closer you get to if you put your hand, basically the way you have to shut it up is to physically touch the loop, and then it shuts up, and then you lift your hand away and it gets louder and louder and louder. So if you take your hand away and it's at its full volume, so that's your volume control. So it goes like that, and the pitch is very precise and very difficult to control. But the closer you move to the antennae, the higher the pitch goes. So go new vibrato doing this, and just altering the shape of the notes with your left hand and then doing the pitch with your right. That's how a theremin works. So there's no physical, apart from touching the loop to shut it up. There's no physical contact with it. An On Martineau is an actual physical keyboard instrument. Which also has valve oscillators in it, but it actually generates tone in a slightly different way. It's a sort of heterodyning thing. There's two valves generating different frequencies, and then one modulates the other, and it's the sum of those frequencies that you hear.
Right.
And the keyboard has a lateral spring on it, so that you can vibrato like by doing that. And it also has mounted under the keyboard. Well, I won't go into that because sort of along there it has a strip, a continuous strip, and a wire loop on pulleys, and on one of the sides of the wire is a ring that you put your finger through. So you can either play with the notes like that, or you stick your finger through the ring and use the keys as a guide, and you can do. In fact, there's little scallops under there, so you can feel where the notes are. But if to make sort of broad sweeps, you basically take your finger off and you just lift your finger away and pull the wire out like that and go. I would love to get my hands on a real one. I really would. Never have done. And here there's a drawer that opens out, which contains all the controls for the electronics. So you've got lots of little buttons for the tone of it. Everything from like a pure soft sine wave up to quite a nasal kind of, pulse wave and noise as well. And it also, that tray also contains a kind of lodging shaped, I think it's made of glass, it may be Perspex, but I think, did they have Perspex in 1928? I don't know. But certainly glass button, which has got carbon granules on pressure granules, a bit like the way carbon granules work in an old-fashioned telephone receiver. The more you compress them, the more current they send. Similarly with this, you get no sound when you just play the keys, but the harder you press on this tablet thing, the louder the notes become. So you can do nice effects. So you can, for example, hold your key like that, and you just literally bap the button. So you can get pizzicato effects. And one of the techniques for getting the nice flowing vocal-like things is you don't just sort of press the button down and hold it and then slide up and down, because that sounds very ugly. But it's as you develop a technique of kind of lifting the pressure slightly off the button as you glide the pitch up and down, to give it a nice a nice sort of connected but not continuous. It feels alive and organic. But fortunately you can do all of this kind of stuff on here, which is one of the reasons I specifically got the PC3, because it's one of the few things in the world that has a pitch ribbon.
Yes.
Although it doesn't run the whole length of the keyboard, which would be nice. It's a long pitch ribbon. Yeah. Most keyboards you only get a little pitch ribbon like that. You can't really do anything with that. You can't control that. And the other thing is the breath controller as well. It has a breath input for a breath controller. Right. So with the combination of the breath controller and the thing, you basically have to just hold a note on the keyboard, blow down the thing, and then play your tunes on this, like that, sliding up and down. And if you need to find and get to a note that's outside the range of that, you have to stop blowing, change note there, and then start again and kind of mentally recenter your tuning from there. But you get your head around it after a while, and you can get pretty much on the virtual on Martino that I use. You can get something that sounds incredibly close to the actual thing, particularly as it samples of the real thing anyway that you're using. So you're controlling it in a similar way, and tis wonderful. And that appears in two tracks. That's on memory. That plays the melody on memory, and also at the beginning of Entropy as well. There.
Okay.
It's doing the sort of John Barry-ish bit.
Well, I think time has, for this part, I think eluded us.
No, it hasn't.
Or thereabouts.
No, it hasn't. We've got at least another 15 minutes.
Got another 15 minutes to go.
Oh, good. Okay.
Okay. Well,
that's until that disc runs out. We've still got another disc if you want.
Right. Okay. So we'll move on a little bit then. Although this is not actually moving on; it's moving around. Okay, because you did a lot of work for Sound on Sound magazine.
Still do, yeah.
I still do, yeah. So you've done a fair number of reviews for them. So we were just talking generally about the reviews you do for them. How do you when you get a piece of kit to review? What is it you look for? Obviously, it's just a case of saying it on and away you go. But what do you look for? How do you structure that?
Well, in all cases, it depends on whether it's hardware or software.
Mm-hmm.
In all cases, what you're looking for is usability
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that it does what it advertises it will do. In other words, if it claims to sound like if it claims to sound like a Hammond organ, it better bloody sound like a Hammond organ. Otherwise, it gets a poor review. So it needs to do what it claims to do. Usability is also an issue, obviously, with both, but it's more relevant to the hardware because that's more likely to be fiddled with and twiddled in a live situation. The software probably less likely to. I mean, those people run whole virtual keyboard rigs off a laptop. I mean, Roger has lots of stuff running in software for his stuff, for example. And if I was doing it live now, I would too. It's just because you have so much stuff. It makes my 11 keyboard rig with Steve look like, peanuts. But it needs usability if it's a hardware thing. I mean, I only do instruments, keyboards. I don't do anything else like amps or stuff like that. And build quality, reliability, aesthetics. This all really applies more to the hardware. Aesthetics do apply to the software as well. But generally speaking, if it works well, is easy to use, and you like what it sounds like, you tend to ignore the aesthetics a bit.
What would be the aesthetics of that's something I have difficulty grasping that concept. What's the aesthetics of software?
Aesthetics of software, okay, let's give you a couple of examples. Something that I'm not sure I can think of anything that's aesthetically bad. I'm sure I can find something, or aesthetically indifferent. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Here is an example of something I think is aesthetically very pleasing. Addictive Drums software, which is the software I use for doing the drums, obviously.
Strangely enough.
Yes, curiously.
I'd never guessed.
Never guessed, no. Okay, so actually some bigger kit that actually exists. Each Day a Colour from drum patch from Tony's album. Okay, that's one I've been using. Okay, so this I find extremely aesthetically pleasing. It's very clear what you've got. You've got all your various kit pieces and the slots for adding more kit pieces.